You know, another myth going around is that the Fed is unwinding QE, the economy is amazing, there's real growth, everything is perfect, and all those newly minted billionaires on Wall Street, remember Jamie Dimon, Lloyd Blankfein, they became personally billionaires since the financial crisis. That seems unusual, right? Because how do they become billionaires in an economy that is decimated and all we have left are unicorns running around in North Dakota? Well, the Fed will give banks a $36 billion taxpayer-funded subsidy this year. So this actually comes ultimately from the Treasury. They pay banks $36 billion this year. And this is something that a lot of people don't point out to what has been happening in the United States in particular. It's not happening in Europe because they have negative rates on deposit. But before 2009, the Fed did not pay interest on banks' excess reserves held at the Fed. This practice was introduced as a taxpayer-funded subsidy to the banks during the crisis. Taxpayer-funded because the Fed turns over any profit at the end of the year to the Treasury. So the Fed is paying what should have been going to the Treasury, and instead we decided through some ledger domain to pay the bankers instead. So this $36 billion that is going to the bankers would have gone to the taxpayer. And to put that into context, how much we're gifting them this year, and let's position it as welfare. Some people don't have that much money and they need food stamps. Well, this is about 50% of the food stamp budget. So this is how much we're giving this is food stamps for Wall Street, essentially.
Well, it's a two-tier economy. There's two different worlds that exist in America. So if I go into a big bank, Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo Bank, and I say, I want to borrow $100,000, and I want you to charge me a 0% interest rate on that, and then I want to deposit that $100,000 at your bank, and I want you to pay me 5% on that, and I want to, therefore, collect all that income and get it tax-free. Okay, can I do that?
No.
No. But a bank can do that. Yeah. These same banks can go to the Federal Reserve Bank and say, I'd like to borrow $1 billion, charge me nothing, and then I want to deposit it with you, and I want to collect an interest on that, tax-free.
The article points out that there is no provision for this to ever be paid back. So it's genuinely food stamps for Wall Street. Food stamp recipients themselves are nonstop maligned on Fox, on CNBC, on CNN, on the cable news. They're maligned and berated and made to feel like nobody ever talks about these bankers being gifted $36 billion a year, and I think it was even higher last year. If the banks had been required to take excess reserves back onto their books, it would have required financial disclosure of their quality, which is probably toxic for many. However, with the Financial Accounting Standards Board recently promulgating Financial Accounting Statements 56 and previously 157, which was the extend and pretend statement, it would seem they feel less and less need for financial disclosure of any kind, because FAS 56, the Financial Accounting Statements 56, states that the government does not have to disclose what it spends taxpayers' money on because of national security concerns.
Oh my, Craig Wright is running the Fed. So in other words, the banks were caught committing accounting fraud, that they had billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets on their books that they claimed were worth, let's say, 100 cents on the dollar that were actually worth zero. So the government, the federal government, the institution that we support with our taxes, gave them a deal. They said, look, either you're going to have to fess up to the fact that you're insolvent, or you're going to have to let us engage in this massive fraud where you borrow money from us for 0% and then deposit it back with us so that you can generate enough money to paper over your fraud. That's your choice.
We started off with Beyond Meat, and there used to be a thing called meat, and that was taken from cattle, from cows, from goats, from various pigs and creatures.
Bunny rabbits.
Yeah, bunny rabbits, squirrels, and people would eat this thing called meat. Then everybody in their minds was trained to think of meat as something that you need, protein, it builds, power and wealth and internal, your body wealth. And then we swapped it out with a thing that we still called meat, just like corn. Maize used to have proteins in it, and now it has nothing but starch and blah. And So we created something that just makes you fat, doesn't help you with any nutrients, doesn't build body strength, doesn't build anything. Here's the same thing, is we used to have banks that lent to the economy, for mortgages, lent for businesses, and tried to create wealth for the economy. Now, the Fed looked at their books and said, oh my God, this is worth nothing. However, we could have a unicorn economy instead. We'll swap all that out. If we keep on doing, well, you used to perform magic tricks in Times Square. How do you, distract people? You keep on moving the little cups so nobody knows where the little ball is. Right?
Well, we learned in the crisis that it's not an insolvency issue, it's an illiquidity issue. We just got to keep moving the cup and ball faster and faster.
So nobody could look at it. So nobody could do an audit of it. That's why they keep on swapping it between the banks and the Fed over and over.
Right, remember the Lehman Repo 105 scandal. Yeah. During the scandal is that every time the auditors came to look at Lehman's books, they moved their debts into an offshore or a special purpose vehicle. Then the auditors would go to the next bank, and then they would move those back to their bank, and then that bank would be looked by Lehman. So it's this constant shell game that we learn. Now, there is this huge garbage patch in the middle of the ocean that's like 3 times the size of France. It's plastic garbage. The Federal Reserve around the world, central banks, you have to understand that they are exuding, garbage. Fiat money is garbage. And when we find a whale with hundreds of pounds of plastic in its gut and it died from garbage consumption, look at the average American is dying from the garbage consumption of high fructose corn syrup. And people say, the price of food's gone down. And if you don't, believe us, it's true. I do believe you because I see a massive obesity problem in this country. And that's the price of having fake food that they shouldn't charge even a penny for it. It's like eating plastic. It is plastic, and many times it's just plastic. There are a lot of fast food restaurants that actually supplement their buffet, all-you-can-eat buffets, with actual bags of plastic. If you talk to anyone in the fast food industry, they'll say, that fish dish is actually 20% actual plastic that we add to as filler.
So, again, the Financial Accounting Standards Board is introducing this new accounting standard of FAST 2056. You don't have to tell us what's on your books under national security reasons, because obviously the national security issue is that if people stop believing in the value of the dollar, then, or whatever your fiat is, then of course it all falls apart. So I'm going to look at another national security issue for the counterparties to this toxic debt. Central banks are ditching the dollar for gold. So that's a headline from Bloomberg. I think those go hand in hand. If you're the creditor to a nation where they're introducing new accounting standards, increasingly basically hiding more and more information about what is actually in that nothing burger, well, first quarter gold purchases by central banks led by Russia and China were the highest in 6 years as countries diversify their assets away from the U.S. dollar. Global gold reserves rose by 145.5 tons in the first quarter, which is a 68% increase from a year earlier. And it wasn't just Russia and China, but Kazakhstan and Turkey, which also are usual gold buyers. But new to this year, for the first time since 2014, was Ecuador. Qatar and Colombia are also starting to stockpile some gold.
Yeah, every country where this show is broadcast is buying gold because as we've been educating countries for 10 years now, if you don't own gold, forget it. You're done. You're toast.
Like beyond meat, this is beyond fiat. People are seeing that, if you look at the world and you see that a lot of people are engaged in this, they forgot that underlying our global economy, even to this day, with all that fiat, all those derivatives, the fact is it's still backed by gold at the end of the day. So you want to own the gold, you want to own the meat, and yet inflows into exchange-traded funds backed by gold during January have been wiped out over the rest of the year, and ETF levels are now at their lowest in 4 months. So people were taking out even it was a paper claim on some gold. They would never get the physical gold. Nevertheless, it was at least a little bit closer to the real thing, the real value, the real meat. But they've been taking their money out and putting it into Beyond Meat. So, they're at the end of the day, once this whole thing falls apart and the unicorn is exposed as just a horse with a cone on its head, people are going to be shocked.
Right. We've never left the gold standard.